Hi everybody, this is Dr. Fitz and I am creating a short presentation to review the contents and format of the Emergent Bilingual Case Study for CI 3000. So we're going to be looking at the case study report folder in our Google Drive. So we'll start out there. We're going to be using the outline today as well as the rubric. And I'm going to start with the rubric here. So your case study report is going to have 3 sections. This is a narrative report, meaning you're writing in paragraphs about your focal student that you have been studying throughout this semester. And there's 3 sections. One section discusses the student. You're going to introduce the student, and you're going to use the information that you gathered from all of the data that you gathered and organized in your profile sheet, through your interview with your teacher, through observing the student, through collecting information about their oral and written language development. You're going to use all of that information to provide a comprehensive sketch of the student. So one thing, to make note of here is that you really want to make sure that you're focusing on the student's strengths as well as their needs. You want to share as much as you can, as much as what you have learned about their background, their interest, their role in their family, how they help their family out, what they're like as a person, in addition to their language proficiency in their home language, their language proficiency in English, and how they're doing academically. So that's section number 1, and you really want to make sure in all of the sections of your report that you're using specific examples to support your conclusions, and so that you're making connections as well between your data that you collected and, for example, if you're discussing the student's English proficiency, you would make connections between observations that you made about their proficiency and the WIDA descriptors that you're using to evaluate that. Whatever data that you're using, make sure it's clear to me as the reader what the source of that information is. Okay, and that goes for every section of your report. So section number 2 is focused on the classroom, and you can see that section number 1 is going to be a little lengthier. There's more information that's needed, and you collected more data for this section. So it does count a little bit more in the overall grade for this project. Section number 2 focuses on the classroom, and you're going to utilize your formal classroom observation as well as any informal observations that you did to describe the classroom and describe your teacher's teaching. You want to look back at our text as well as the chapters from Echeverria, Vaught, and Short on lesson preparation and building background to make connections between what you observed and recommendations for teaching bilingual students. You want to again give specific examples from what you observed, and as I already mentioned here, you want to think about what aspects of their instruction would be recommended for kids who are bilingual and who are learning English as an additional language. So that's section number 2. The last section is your recommendations section, and so here, let's say in your first section you stated that the student is still developing their writing proficiency. If you state something in the student or classroom section that demonstrates that a student has a need, then that's something that you're going to want to address in your recommendations. So in your recommendations, you want to start out by describing what you think would be a beneficial learning environment for the student. For example, does the child work better in in cooperative learning types of environment, or do they like to have time to work individually in quiet places? So discuss that briefly. Number 2 is recommendations that focus on helping the student grow, either with regards to their language development in English, their language development in Spanish, or using both of those together. Your recommendation might also relate to, changes to make in the classroom environment, or other things that might relate to the child's academic and social development as well as language development. For each recommendation that you make, you want to make sure that you clearly explain why it's important for the student, and you want to give a specific example and make a connection to one of our texts or to an outside source to show that the recommendation that you're making is reasonable and it's supported by research as well. So that's the third section, and that is really the last section. On the outline, let's open the outline really quickly here. On the outline, I do have an area for you to provide me with some feedback on the assignment. Please do write some sort of a conclusion, just a short paragraph to kind of sum up what did you learn from doing the assignment, and then any feedback that you might have. But that's not part of your grade, so just to make note on that. After your 3 sections and your conclusion, then after that will come your references page. Your references page is going to be needed because you need to cite sources to support some of the assertions that you're going to be making. You don't need to cite your data that you collected because you're including your data as appendices, but you would cite text. So let's say you were mentioning that your teacher does a good job of developing a familial sense of belonging in the classroom, and you make a connection to some statements in our translanguaging text. You would go and make that connection strongly, and you would cite the text there, and that's when you would list that text in your reference section. On the rubric, you'll notice that there are 2 other areas here. The analysis area of the rubric, that is not a separate portion of the case study. That is for me to evaluate to what extent did you make connections between the data that you collected and what you observed in the classroom and what is recommended by our text authors, by other things that we've read throughout the semester. For example, those chapters from Echeverria, Vaught, and Short, from Pauline Gibbons, and that I see that you're reflecting on those connections and what you're learning from doing the report. So you're not just reporting the data, you are interpreting the data, you're analyzing it, and that's where this portion of the grade is coming from. This section here of the rubric is related to your data collection, which you are all finished with. So for that, make sure that you include it with your case study. Make sure that if I gave you feedback on any of your data collection points, and I ask that you, develop more examples or something along those lines, make sure you attend to that feedback. The quality of the data that you collected, as well as how you use it in your report, that comprises this how I evaluate that section of the rubric. And then the final section relates to writer's craft, like how well does the paper flow, is it edited, things like that. Do remember that Google ain't the best when it comes to finding spelling and particularly capitalization errors, I've noticed, and that when you download your case study report and save it as a PDF, make sure you turn on that spell check, make sure you check your spelling and grammar, because I've noticed that gets turned off in Google. So that's all. That's plenty of time for me talking. Please let me know what questions that you have, and I look forward to seeing you soon.